We begin in the Middle East, where Israel's coming under increasing international pressure over how it's conducting the war in Gaza. President Joe Biden said he believes Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is making a mistake, and he's called on Israel to agree to a 6 to 8 week ceasefire. The president had previously said Hamas should agree to pause and release its remaining hostages. Meanwhile, Australia has suggested that formally recognising a Palestinian state would strengthen momentum towards peace. And in the past hour, Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has said recognising a Palestinian state is in Europe's geopolitical interests. In a speech to Spain's parliament, he also warned that Israel's disproportionate response in the Gaza war risks destabilising the Middle East and, as a consequence, the entire world. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first let's go to President Biden. Now, he made his comments in an interview recorded last Wednesday with Univision, that's a US Spanish language TV network. Let's have a listen in.
I think what he's doing is a mistake. I don't agree with his approach. I think it's outrageous that those three vehicles were hit by drones and taken out on a highway where it wasn't like it was along the shore. It wasn't like there was a convoy moving there, etc. So what I'm calling for is for the Israelis to just call for a ceasefire. I've spoken with everyone from the Saudis to the Jordanians to the Egyptians. They're prepared to move in. They're prepared to move this food in, and I think there's no excuse to not provide for the medical and the food needs of those people.
President Biden speaking to Univision there. Well, Australia's foreign minister has suggested that the country could recognise Palestinian statehood, though Hamas would have no role in its governance. Penny Wong said the refusal of Mr Netanyahu's government to even engage on the issue has caused widespread frustration.
Recognising a Palestinian state, one that can only exist side by side with a secure Israel, doesn't just offer the Palestinian people an opportunity to realise their aspirations, it also strengthens the forces for peace, and it undermines extremism. It undermines Hamas, Iran and Iran's other destructive proxies in the region. So I say to you, a two-state solution is the only hope of breaking the endless cycle of violence.
Well, for more on those developments, we can cross live to Jerusalem and speak to my colleague and Middle East correspondent Hugo Bachega. So some strong comments from President Joe Biden and, of course, now from Australia and Spain. Do we have any reaction or any analysis on what Israel's reaction might be?
Well, Regina, I think first, talking about President, Biden and his comments. So this was an interview that was, carried out last week, right after that deadly Israeli strike on the aid convoy. So perhaps at the peak of international condemnation, international anger over the way the Israelis have been conducting this war. And now, even President Biden putting pressure on the Israelis to accept a ceasefire. So there is a deal on the table. The Americans have been heavily involved in negotiating this deal and, putting this deal on the table. And they have been putting a lot of pressure on the Israelis to accept this deal. So now we understand that Hamas is analyzing this proposal. The main points of the deal are obviously, the release of hostages. 40 hostages will be released in exchange for 900 Palestinians who are now being held in Israeli jails. And in return, this would, lead to a 6-week ceasefire. So there's also a lot of pressure on Hamas, especially from the Egyptians and the Qataris who've been acting as mediators in these negotiations. Now, what the Israelis have been saying is that, well, look, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under obviously a lot of pressure from international allies, in particular the United States. There's a lot of pressure from the families of the hostages who want to see a deal. They say the time is running out to save the hostages. But at the same time, he's under a lot of pressure from his hardline allies who give support to his coalition. And they say that they are against the idea of making concessions, and they say that the Israelis need to finish the job, need to destroy Hamas. So they say that the war must continue. So, you know, a lot of pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu from all sides.
OK, Hugo Bachega in Jerusalem, thank you very much for that update.